it, but you might.
For my mother, my grandmother, my father, my uncle, and for the common good, I must now kill you and your brother.
Carrie Fisher, actress, died at the age of 60. On the phone with us is David Blaustein, ABC News entertainment correspondent. Good morning, David.
Good morning, Kelly.
Hi, David.
How are you? Well, we're finishing off 2016 with another sad death, especially for folks who kind of live and breathe the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, triple punctuation to the end of a really terrible year as far as losing gifted and talented people who meant so much to many of our lives. And, when we lose a celebrity and we feel something, it really plays into nostalgia more than anything else. And especially when you have a musician in particular, like a George Michael or somebody like a Carrie Fisher, because Star Wars was so important to so many people, and it tethers you to your childhood. Like a great song, like a George Michael song, might remind you of a particular time in high school or junior high school or something important that happened, and it stimulates that sense memory, and suddenly you can feel emotions that you were feeling in a moment, and you can smell smells and hear things, and I think that's part of the reason why we get so sad when we lose icons, or they don't necessarily have to be iconic. But in the case of Carrie Fisher, she certainly was an icon. That's a word that we throw around a lot, just like legend, where we're overstating the importance of someone, but you're not overstating the importance of Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia. That's not an icon from a particular era. That is an icon in the Hollywood canon. That is one of the all-time iconic characters. And you think about what Princess Leia meant, and at the time that Princess Leia happened, I mean, where were the great female heroines at that point? I mean, we didn't really have any. I mean, what, Barbarella? I don't really think so. You have Carrie Fisher, and then suddenly in the late 70s, you have all these little girls who want to dress up like Carrie Fisher, and in the 1980s, all these little girls who want to dress up like Carrie Fisher and Princess Leia, and in the 90s, and in the aughts, and now. It was a transgenerational thing, and she opened up the door and paved the way for other great heroines and action heroes in sci-fi. A couple of years later, you had Ripley in Alien, and then you had Sarah Connor in Terminator. And I'm not so sure that those characters would be as widely accepted if it wasn't for a Princess Leia.
Right. Carrie Fisher was far from a one-trick pony. I mean, she had a substantial body of work, and frankly, I didn't know. I had forgotten about some of the movies she was in. Some really great stuff.
Yeah, that's the bittersweet thing about somebody dying. Like when a celebrity dies, you start learning about and realizing that there was a whole other dimension to them. And she had many, and there were nuances, and it was complicated. A lot of that had to do with her struggle with mental illness, which fed into a struggle with alcohol and drug addiction as well. But, obviously mental illness and any sort of addiction can take a person down. And, we may find out eventually that ultimately maybe that is what she succumbed to in a roundabout way. But what we do know is she took it and turned it into something special. It helped her writing career. She was a brilliant writer, and she was very funny. She was a humorist, and she wrote Postcards from the Edge, which was loosely based on her life. She turned it into a one-woman show. She wrote the screenplay, and then it became a movie, as you well know, starring Meryl Streep playing the character that's loosely based on her. And I think Hollywood took notice. They said, this Carrie Fisher, she's more than Princess Leia. She's actually a very good writer, and she's good with a screenplay. Maybe she could help us with our screenplays. And then she went on to doctor and, punch up a number of scripts, most notably Hook. Carrie Fisher worked on Hook.
Right.
She worked on The Wedding Singer. She worked on Sister Act. And what do those three movies have in common? They're funny.
Exactly.
And a lot of that had to do with Carrie Fisher's work on those screenplays. And then also bittersweet. We see, a lot of people who didn't know Carrie Fisher, didn't know what she was up to, or really hadn't been familiar with, the last 30 years of her life. They got to see her on a press tour last year when she was promoting A Force Awakens. and they got to see just how funny and quick-witted she was. And by the way, those were elements that she brought to Princess Leia. Princess Leia was that successful because there was so much Carrie Fisher in Princess Leia, the sardonic wit, the bravery, and just the dry humor as well. All Princess Leia, but what else does Princess Leia represent? She represents hope. Star Wars Episode 4 is called A New Hope, and certainly if you've seen Rogue One, you also know how that's relevant to her message. And, it's just, it's terribly sad to see her go so early.
Absolutely.
Not to mention that also she came from basically Hollywood royalty with her parents, Eddie Fisher, and her mother. And
Well,
she
to
has
that point, she was an intergalactic princess, wasn't she? But she was really a Hollywood princess, too.
Absolutely.
She was
Yes.
born to a king and queen of Hollywood.
Yes.
Well, very sad, the passing of Carrie Fisher. Thank you so much, David Blaustein, for joining us this morning.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. It is, as we said, when somebody passes away, and we were so connected to them, even though we didn't know them personally, it hurts like we did.
Yeah. And like David said, you really appreciate their body of work even more so, after they have died.
Thank you. It's 9 o'clock, KTRS.